Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Ichigo Awakens in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 11, Soul Society Acts. Karakura. Lunchtime. It was the next day, all the damage was undone. Urahara and Yoriyuki were planning the next training schedule and methods to account for Orium and Tatsuki awakening to their own powers. Everything else went along as normal. The students went to school and the adults planned for what might come next. Ichigo had invited Urayu to lunch, despite protests from Kigo. All Ichigo said was, "Deal with it." "Hey Kigo." Ichigo called his cheerful friend. "Tell us a story." Kigo felt honored. Despite his suspicions, lunch actually had a rather lively atmosphere. "Very well." Kigo yelled out happily. "Let me regale you with the tale dash. This should buy us the entire lunch period," Ichigo said, turning to Urayu. "What happened?" Father confirmed that it was definitely hollow bait that was used. They went to Urahara's to rest and recover. After Urayu's arms healed, he went to see if Ryukin had any information or guesses as to what had happened. Pretty potent for the amount of hollows, but still nothing to summon even one Minos Grande. So the Vandenreich was behind that incident. Ichigo summarized. But someone else capitalized on it. Indeed. They figured who had sent the Minos but didn't say anything. "What about you?" the Quincy asked after a moment of silence. "What do you mean?" Ichigo responded. "Your lady friend seemed more than a little angry at you after that whole powerless thing." "What happened?" Urayu asked. Normally he wouldn't care, but Ichigo needed to focus, and if he was distracted by love troubles then they would both be in trouble. "Well." Flashback, last night. Tatsuki, I'm SOR-. Ichigo tried to say as he was punched in the face, again, by his irate girlfriend. When her powers awakened, Ichigo wanted to apologize for telling her she was weak. He couldn't get a word in edgewise because she just kept punching him every time he said something. "And just where do you get off saying that I'm the one that needs protecting when I've fought your battles for you when we were kids?" she yelled, getting her knuckles healed by Orium. Ichigo was very tough in spirit form. He didn't even bleed while Tatsuki's knuckles got bruised before Orium started healing. "You were the biggest crybaby. All Tatsuki wanted was to keep by your side, Miniichi." Orium scolded with a pouty face. "You should know that better than anyone. And Orium's very gentle, but that doesn't mean you should push her to the side simply because she couldn't fight." Tatsuki kept up. Ishine stopped by to pick up Ichigo while talking with Urahara about what happened earlier. "You better make this up to us in the biggest way, you jerk." Tatsuki glared as Ichigo realized that if he didn't say the right things, she would just punch him and hurt herself again. "Fine," he said, relenting to his angry ladies. "How shall I pay for my sins?" Tatsuki grabbed his Shiakusho and pulled him in close. "This for starters." She grabbed the back of his head and crushed their lips together, shocking everyone but Orium, who took her turn once Tatsuki relented. Ishine was silently cheering the girls on in making his son a man while Urahara grabbed him a camera to commemorate the wonderful occasion. "Tatsuki!" They heard a familiar yell as the former head of the Shihoin clan stormed over to her students. "What do you think you're doing?" We were just kissing our boyfriend sensei." Tatsuki stammered. She was afraid of the aura Yoriyuki displayed, knowing better than to anger her teacher. "No, you aren't," Yoriyuki stated, pushing them aside and getting in close with Ichigo, whose brain appeared to stop working. "This is how you kiss." She smiled mischievously before opening Ichigo's mouth and giving him a deep kiss. "Remember," she mumbled while continuing to explore Ichigo's mouth, "don't force it. Be gentle and rub against his tongue a bit," she explained, letting the girls watch with massive blushes on their faces. Ichigo apparently came back to reality, but he couldn't fight against the more experienced woman's ministrations. She finally pulled back to let them both catch their breaths. "Now you try." The two girls nodded dumbly and took his lips again. Soon they collapsed onto the floor, the girls in his lap with each taking turns. "So what are we going to call this?" Urahara asked as he and Ishine documented this moment of Ichigo's life. It was agreed among everyone to record the biggest moments of his and Yurai's lives for when Masaki and Connie finally woke up, which Urahara predicted would be sometime that year. Ichigo's first makeout. Ishine giggled uncontrollably. Feeling some pride as a father for having a stud of a son, but also knowing he could milk this for quite some time. And we will not show Masaki. Ever. Smiling as his son finally gave in and returned them. Thinks she wants him to stay her baby boy. Urahara guessed. Maybe. Ishine admitted. Nothing else really important happened that day, other than Ichigo staying in a deep haze until the morning. Back to the present. Wow. Uriah couldn't think of anything else to say. Yeah. Ichigo agreed, taking another bite of his bento lunch. I was going to destroy it, but that was some pretty good tips. Gotta keep the girls happy. Uriah. Is that you or Zanjitsu talking? The Quincy asked, knowing about Ichigo's Zanpakuto. Me, but just to shut him up. Ichigo answered. He was both ecstatic and pissed because I didn't try to cop a feel. Boobs and butts. Big boobs and nice butts. Right there. And you didn't go for it. His sword yelled at him. I am not forgiving you until you have sex with one of them. At least. Yeah. He says that because he's my hollow he's also my instincts. Ichigo said, trying to make conversation and ignore his sword spirit. Which is eat and mate. Primal instincts. Uriah guessed. At least someone gets it. Zanjitsu said. Replace eating with fighting and that sounds right. Ichigo said. But enough fun, you felt it too, right? The conversation took a more serious tone that even gave Kigo pause as the attention shifted before Chad brought Kigo back to his story. Yeah. 2 strong Ryotsu signatures appeared in the city this morning. Uriah confirmed what his cousin was getting at. Dad was right. Soul Society finally sent someone. Any appearance and sudden disappearance of Aminos Grande Hollow was enough to warrant the attention of the Godei 13. Rukia has overstayed her role in Karakura, and they've come to get her. Same time, with Rukia. She sat in the tree, pensively staring into the sky in contemplation. She can't stay with Ichigo and the Kurosakis anymore. Ishine would definitely be put on trial for abandoning his post and Ichigo would be executed for taking her powers, not to mention the others that displayed their powers. She needed to get out of there for their own sakes, or the guild would destroy her if anything happened to them because of her. Hey Rukia. She heard one of her classmates call out to her. Why don't you join us for lunch? It was the tanned one, Mehana she recalled, with the other girls that Tatsuki and Orium were friends with. She did so reluctantly, needing to continue her cover for the rest of the day before she made her move. They sat in a circle, calmly eating their meals, until Mehana brought up the number one gossip subject among teenage girls. Hey, can I ask you something? Do you have a crush on Ichigo? She asked, making Rukia spew out the juice she was drinking in response. That's a maybe, but what is your relationship with him? Family friends, that's all. Tatsuki said quickly, going with the story Ichigo told her after they were done making out. Mehana. The petite Mikuru scolded her friend. That's not something you just ask straight out like that. I don't see why not, everyone wanted to ask that. She defended. I didn't want to ask that. Mikuru said, trying to steer the conversation away from the boy still was afraid of. What's your problem with him anyway? Tatsuki asked. I just think he's scary looking is all. She said, embarrassed by such childish reasoning. Sure he looks intimidating, but he's also really gentle. Tatsuki said, smiling in remembrance of how he still held her tenderly that night she yelled at him. She just melted in those strong arms of his. He's a real tender lover too. Orium said, completely without shame. He's such a great kisser after one lesson. Everyone else stared at the airhead in surprise, or shock in Chizuru's case, as Orium blushed and giggled. He tasted so good too. Tatsuki only let out an irritated sigh. Yeah, I can vouch for that. Tatsuki admitted, though she suspected it was because of everyone swapping spit in that makeout. You mean? Ryo asked, being the first to come to her senses as the stoic one of the group. Yep, Ichigo's our boyfriend," Tatsuki declared in defeat of having been exposed. Orium just nodded, happily declaring her relationship with the strawberry. "And if Rukia wants in this club, she needs our permission," she said, surprising everyone again. Rukia couldn't help but imagine being one of Ichigo's girlfriends. She started thinking about it while Chizuru went crazy about her hymen being defiled, and if she couldn't have Orium's first kiss, she'd settle for her virginity. Needless to say, everyone was trying to restrain Chizuru after that. Rukia just went off with her imagination about being Ichigo's lover. Complimenting her, praising her skills, holding her in his arms, kissing. "Looks like Kukaki's a bit of a perv," Mehana said, tickling Chizuru's stomach while Tatsuki had her in a headlock. Rukia wiped away the small bit of blood dripping from her nose as she tried to deny the notion. The day passed by simply after that. Night with Rukia. She ran, she had to run as far away as possible, keep them safe, don't let them share her burden. They were just there for shelter. She didn't care about any of them, not about the girls in high school, not the Kurosakis, and definitely not Ichigo. That's what she wanted to believe anyway. She liked them, she enjoyed her time with them, she didn't want them in danger. She knew Ichigo was powerful, but she still didn't want him to fight against Soul Society. She had one time been of the belief that he was equal to a captain, but he had only years of training and experience, where captains have centuries. It would be foolish of him to fight one. So she decided to run for their sake, but it hurt her to leave without a goodbye. "Am I getting too attached to this world?" she asked, unaware of the two bearing down on her. "Yes." She heard a familiar voice ring out. She stopped in her tracks to look at the man that's hunted her down. "You've broken quite a severe law, Rukia." He had a red ponytail and tribal tattoos, dressed as a Soul Reaper with a badge on his arm. "Renji?" she asked in disbelief, wondering if it was her old friend. "Renji Abarai." He dropped down, swinging his blade as her, making her jump back and eject from her Jigai. "At least you still have some powers, and you're not lax enough to drop your guard completely," he complimented, raising to his full height. "Now call him Rukia. The man that stole your powers." Rukia stayed in a guarded stance, ready to run if need be. "Why do you think I lost my powers to a human?" she defended. "Maybe I got badly injured and didn't want to shame Oni-sama by showing weakness." "If you're going with that argument, then you shouldn't lie," Renji retorted. "Should she, Captain Kukaki?" Rukia froze, feeling a very familiar, very ominous presence behind her. She turned to see him, wearing that scarf and hair ornaments, the Kukaki clan head. "Byakuya Oni-sama." She shuddered out, feeling terrified. "Rukia," he said simply, watching his lieutenant attack her again as she dodged again. "You know it's a crime to grant your powers to a human," Renji said. "We have orders to execute him." He prepared for his next attack. "Now call him Rukia. We'll capture you and he will die. So don't try to defend him." He settled into his stance. "This time, my next attack will be serious. I have nothing to worry about then," someone said before a rock the size of a baseball hit Renji in the face, breaking his visor and leaving a few cuts. "Because if you needed to get serious against her in that state," he said, jumping down and revealing himself, "then I'll have no problems against you." "Who the hell are you?" Renji growled at the orange-haired man. "Ichigo Kurosaki," he declared fearlessly, "the human you're looking for." With Ichigo earlier. He was watching over the city, waiting silently, so still one would think him asleep. Already in his Shinigami state with 3 red ribbons in his hand, sensing and waiting. He felt Rukia run off, writing only a letter to let him know her plans, run as far as she could to spare his family the wrath of Soul Society. But he made a promise to help her and he keeps his word. Now here he was, with his spirit sense keeping track of the 3 other Soul Reapers and their spirit ribbons in hands to increase that accuracy. They finally met and he moved, disappeared from his perch in an instant when the first strike was made. He found them, 2 Shinigami, attacking Rukia, from the 6th Division judging from that captain's Haori. He grabbed a rock and threw it at the attacking redhead. "Who the hell are you?" he asked after Ichigo jumped down. Ichigo Kurosake, the human you're looking for? He told the irate Renji. So you're the human that stole Rukia's powers? The Soul Reaper growled. By accident, yes. Ichigo admitted. Your point. Renji charged at Ichigo, swinging his Zanpakuto down with furious strike after strike. Ichigo turned his blade to a more normal size in order to throw off his opponent, should the need arise. You're dead. Renji growled, slamming his blade against Ichigo's in an attempt to kill the man who gave his best friend a death sentence. Byakuya watched in silence, analyzing this newcomer as his subordinate attacked. Years of experience let him know who was going to win this fight. This is the one that slew those Minos. He questioned as the two got into a blade lock. Renji, this battle was over before it even began. Here's what'll happen. Renji growled with an angry smirk, furious at the human before him and furious at his inability to try and save Rukia from her fate. Orders were orders. You'll die, Rukia gets her powers back, and then she'll dash. He was interrupted when Ichigo twisted the blades and thrust his blade's hilt into Renji's chin, making him bite his tongue. Didn't anyone ever tell you to shut up in the middle of a fight? Ichigo asked, calm and collected as Renji grasped his mouth in pain. You bast dash. He was about to yell, but Ichigo was already in front of Byakuya. Hello, Captain. Ichigo greeted, almost politely, to the noble who looked at the human with a calm expression. Kukaki. Captain Byakuya Kukaki. He responded, still trying to read the young human. Thank you. Ichigo said before preparing to explain what happened. At least he's making an effort, it seems. Thought the noble, a little happy someone is trying to save his sister. Here's what happened. I've been spiritually aware since I was a kid. Apparently one of my ancestors was a Soul Reaper and I learned most of the important stuff from hand-me-down knowledge. He explained, not telling the full story. From there I prepared to fight hollows to protect my friends and family. When I finally had the means, I used something that would absorb enough Reishi to allow me to change into a Shinigami. Rukia simply became a casualty and I've been helping her as a way to make up for her situation. He raised his blade to block another strike from Renji. Do you think this changes the situation? He roared in anger at a child humiliating him. He's a rude one. Wouldn't you say so? Ichigo asked the captain, not sparing a glance at his attacker. Quite. He agreed, giving Renji a look to tell him to back off. His lieutenant reluctantly obeyed. So that is the story. More or less. Ichigo admitted. What happens now? We'll still have to take Rukia in, with you as a witness. Byakuya answered. Maybe this will lighten her sentence. But I'll have to die. Ichigo said, knowing from what his teachers said about the judicial system of Soul Society. Very likely. He looked to Renji again, who took the signal to continue and made a swing. He stabbed through Ichigo's back before it disappeared and he received a hard kick to his side. Sorry, but I'm not in favor of dying just yet. He apologized. But I'll make a promise. Renji wins, I go willingly. He loses, I don't. He said, face to face with the captain. I have no doubt anymore about the reports of you slaying those Minos Grande. Byakuya said, knowing this battle would end in Ichigo's victory. But Renji needed an attitude adjustment. Go ahead. I will not stand for this. Renji growled. Roar. Zabumaru. He said, wiping a hand over his blade, letting it transform into a six-segmented blade with sharp protrusions. The fight seemed on hold as both sides waited for the other to move. Rukia stood by her brother, knowing and accepting her fight, but silently hoping Ichigo would survive. Well. Renji finally growled. Ichigo took a second to glance between his own blade and Renji's. Guessing at what the lieutenant meant, Ichigo finally allowed his blade to grow to the matching size of Zabumaru. Happy? He asked, confused. Renji gawked in surprise, thinking that no Shikai could be so worthless as to just be a size increase. Byakuya, on the other hand, re-evaluated the hybrid as he's shown a level of control only captains used. What scared the noble was the possibility was that Ichigo still didn't have full control of his Ryutsu. That's your Shikai. Renji asked, again annoyed at the whelp. What? Ichigo responded dumbly. I don't have Shikai. Renji couldn't believe this. Then you're a fool? He yelled, swinging his whip-like sword, Ichigo defending against the hard swings with visible effort. A fake Soul Reaper who doesn't even know his own Zanpakuto's name. He broke Ichigo's guard and made for the killing blow. The fool. The Kuchikis said at the same time. Rukia, in sorrow for her friend, and Byakuya, for his rash subordinate. Ichigo swung his blade, striking the top segment of Zabumaru, with the resulting shockwave breaking the connection to the hilt. Renji could only gawk as his blade fell apart in a mess, leaving only his hilt and blade base, before feeling himself getting stabbed. I said, I don't have Shikai. Ichigo said, Zanjutsu again in two forms with a katana in one hand and a tanto knife, buried in Renji's side. Because Zanjutsu won't let me use Shikai while in this state. Using Rukia's powers as a link to my own. He removing the dagger from Renji as the lieutenant dropped to his knees, blood spilling out of the hole in his side and staining his shiakuso. Your arrogance is your undoing. He was about to swing again before stopping. Curiously, he reached up to his chest, directly above his soul chain and soul sleep, before feeling it soaked in his blood. He pulled open his robes to see two bleeding holes in his chest. Behind Renji was Byakuya, sheathing his blade. Humph. He grunted, more mad at himself for dropping his guard so easily. You won. He said simply, Ichigo dropping to his knees as his strength left him. But I was still free to act. He grabbed his subordinate and helped him to Rukia, who began healing her old friend. You will lose your powers, but you will survive. He declared to the boy, lying on the ground in a small pool of blood, unaware of the boy's healing. Live you life, die, then come to Soul Society. Byakuya said, opening the spirit gate to Soul Society. You may make a fine Soul Reaper after all. He said, preparing to walk through, with Renji and Rukia in tow. He barely took another step before turning, saying, Bakudo number 81. Danku. Creating a transparent barrier between them and the rising Ichigo, feeling danger in the boy. Zanjutsu. Ichigo yelled, unleashing a black and blue Getsuga against the barrier. Simply the result of activating a first transformation. Byakuya was in shock of the boy. How can he have this much power? He questioned before shoving his sister and lieutenant through the portal, shutting it, and dodging to avoid the blast that finally cracked through his Kido barrier. Mostly he was fine, his arm was charred and broken. Sorry. Zanjutsu was pretty mad at you for that sneak attack. Ichigo said, slowly rising to his feet, looking pale and tired. But I should thank you. He told the captain, who was grasping his arm in pain. You severed my link to Rukia's powers, and finally balanced my own. The two injured Shinigami stood on their feet, watching the other closely. Neither of us are in any condition to keep fighting. So let me say this. 2 weeks. I'll be in Soul Society for 2 things. Saving Rukia, and I need to talk to the captain commander. Byakuya glared at the youth for his display of arrogance, but knew that he was in no condition to fight. Very well. He said, opening another Senkaimon. 2 weeks it shall be. Leaving it at that while he needed to reach Squad 4 as soon as possible. Ichigo straightened up, feeling himself be restored as his regeneration finally kicked in. Finally. He shook himself to get the feeling back into his limbs. Now, how to break the news to everyone else. Chapter 12, Preparations for the Soul Society. Ichigo's Inner World. Well, that happened. Ichigo said, laying on one of the many towers that inhabited his world. After the fight with Renji and Byakuya, Ichigo made his way back to the Urahara Shoten. When he got there, however, he collapsed on the floor and brought himself to his inner world. By his side was the massive kyber blade with cloth wrapping around the tang. No hilt, no guard, just a bare blade. I wonder what the explanation for this is. Well, it's still not a real Zanpakuto, if that's what you're wondering. He heard a warped speech that mimicked his own. He leaned forward to see a white copy of himself with black and gold eyes. Hey there, King. Zanjutsu said, smiling a predatory grin. Ichigo raised an eyebrow in confusion. What is this anyway? he asked, sitting up across from his blade. I know it's comprised of reishi, but I thought I couldn't do that whole release stuff. Your blade is manipulated by reishi, given form through your hollow, and channels the purification of a soul reaper, said the aged wisdom of his Quincy powers, appearing next to Ichigo. That's all the explanation I'm getting, isn't it? Ichigo asked. Best guess we're going with, Zanjitsu said, helping his wielder to his feet. And it's not exactly Shikai. It's you being able to use more of your power. Like faster healing and zeros. The elder said. So why did I still pass out? Looking at his hollow side, who gave him a deadpan look. Because you heal from injuries, Zanjitsu explained. Damage remains and did lose a lot of blood before it finally kicked in. The limit of your healing is recreating major organs, so avoid any large blasts. We should also build up your endurance and damage tolerance, the elder Zanjitsu said. However, before that, you need to talk with everyone. Storming Soul Society alone is insane. And making reservations for the party isn't exactly smart either, Zanjitsu scolded. And speaking of a party, yours just showed up, he said before slapping Ichigo back into the outside. Urahara's shop. Several people occupied the quaint little store of the scientist, some old friends of his while others were his students. They sat and waited for Ichigo to recover from his confrontation with Byakuya. The children believed it a dirty move while the adults recognized the truth, a golden opportunity taken. Byakuya was a prideful man and it would not do to fail a mission, no matter the terms of the bet. Tatsuki glared at her boyfriend, wanting to chastise him for recklessness while Orium wanted to help him recover. Urayu recognized that the time was coming to meet the captain commander of the Shinigami and prepare for the incoming war with the Quincy. Chad, everyone was busy trying to convince him that it wasn't his fault for Ichigo's condition, that he did not break his vow to his friend. Another 10 minutes passed before the object of their discussion finally awoke. Note to self, need to dash, Ichigo started saying before taking a fist to his face. What were you thinking, you idiot? Tatsuki yelled as Yuriyuki held her back, Orium already healing Ichigo. Why would you go off against the enemy without any backup and expect to come out unscathed? Because I told Rukia I would talk to them, Ichigo yelled back, already coming back to full because of the healing shield. And I told them the mostly true story, he admitted. Considering the circumstances, you may have bought her more time, Ishine said, praising his son. Good job, son. And since we have a way into Soul Society already ready, we can focus on your training, Urahara said cheerfully. But if you thought we were rough before, a dark aura covered the room as Yuriyuki gave a predatory glare and grin, then you have no idea what you're in for. A silent, grim, calm settled over the youths. That massive swarm of hollows was minor league, nothing to really write home about. Now, things were going to be for keeps. Soul Society meeting with the captains. There he was standing with his colleague captains of the Godi I-13. An awkward menagerie of individuals of various personalities and mindsets. He had delivered his report to the aged man in front of him, the leader of all Shinigami, Captain Commander Genri Yusai Yamamoto. Now Byakuya could only hope for a favorable outcome. I have no doubts that if execution could have been avoided, and I kept better control of my lieutenant, he would be standing here with us serving as a witness. Byakuya finished, returning to his place among the captains. He didn't mention the last thing that Ichigo had told him, something reserved only for the commander. He saw the one-eyed and battle-scarred barbarian that led the 11th squad bear a toothy grin in desire of the fight the boy promised, while the deranged scientist that commanded the 12th looked intrigued. He supposed that was better, the last thing he needed was that psychopath, Mayuri Kuratsuki, ranting about how the Jigai was destroyed by the boy when his powers came back. This is a most curious development, spoke Yamamoto, in a gravelly deep tone that rang with power and experience. This may require further investigation. If she did not truly break the laws, then the boy will have to be brought here to face charges. Some would deny the claims made and would push for the execution of Rukia, but the new report opened possibilities that they couldn't help but ponder on. A descendant of a Soul Reaper that managed to unlock his latent ability? This required more evidence. No one motioned to push for Rukia's death. Dismissed, he declared with a slam of his cane. The captains moved to return to their various divisions, however Byakuya stayed to speak with the commander. Sir, it's been a while since you were at the Kukaki compound, correct? Byakuya asked his aged superior. How about you take a break and have some tea with me? Yamamoto took a moment to consider. I think I may take you up on that offer, young man. Yamamoto decided, giving Kukaki leave to start preparations. Well, aren't you the generous one? A sly tone mocked the noble Kukaki. He turned to see a silver-haired fox-like man talking to him. Or maybe you're trying to butter him up to plea for your sister's freedom. Byakuya simply watched the taunting fox with contempt. Don't be absurd, he told his colleague. If Rukia is guilty, I'll kill her myself. My grandfather and the commander were old friends. It's only right to tend to that bond, he said before walking off. I have to make sure only the commander and those he deems trustworthy hear this, he thought to himself, remembering the resolve he saw in Ichigo. He wasn't an enemy. Karakura High, last day of school. Ichigo felt sick. The day went by with nothing changing. The people still talked the same, acted the same, were the same, the only difference was a solitary empty desk in the classroom. The only evidence of Rukia Kukaki ever existing in their lives. That and the memories of the spiritually aware. Now that classes were finally over, the team Ichigo could finally move on to begin their training. Going to find Kukaki-san, aren't you? Ichigo heard, surprised by his friend Kigo, who sneaked up behind him. Kigo was giving his friend a hopeful smile as he explained an unasked question. I don't know when it happened, but I was able to see spirits and I saw you with her a few times. He gave Ichigo a pat on the back. It's not just me either. Mizuho and Chizuru can see them too. He wrapped his arms around Ichigo in a friendly hug. Just promise you guys will come back safely, he whispered. Kigo, Ichigo muttered, patting his friend's arms. If you don't let go, I'm breaking your arms. Kigo snorted out, but he got the message. Don't worry, we'll be fine. Catch you later, Ichigo, he yelled out. Mizuho is taking me with him and his 10 lady friends to Hawaii, he cheered while skipping away. Well, I guess he deserves a break, Ichigo said, getting up to meet with Chad. There were a few people he had to introduce the giant to for his training. Karakura Hospital, main office. He took a deep breath, aware of what was going to happen. His father would likely disapprove of him going to Soul Society, wanting him to keep his mind focused on the goal of helping his cousin. Were that the case, he would allow it, but Uriah still harbored a hate for Shinigami after Soken's death. Uriah was still scared that he would abandon his friends simply for the sake of vengeance. Both father and son knew this, that made the decision difficult. I expect a full report when you get back, Uriah, Ryakan said, finishing his evaluation of his son sitting across from him. He rose from his seat while Uriah looked at his father in surprise. Your actions in Soul Society will determine how you and I proceed with your training, he said as he walked to his bookcase, shelves filled row by row with medical and surgical books and case studies, except for one solitary box on the top of it all. He took it from the dusty resting place, and passed it to his son. This is... Uriah exclaimed. It was about as long as his forearm, with a sandy color that was quite light with a seal tied taut around it. I trust you know how to use it, Ryakan asked his son, who nodded in affirmation. But this is still old Quincy methods, Uriah protested. Shouldn't I bring my purification cross instead? Ryakan shook his head at his son. I'm not saying don't bring that with you, he firmly scolded his son. I'm telling you to fight with the Sanrei glove. Were you fighting hollows, I'd insist on the first, but you are fighting Shinigami, Ryakan explained. Fight with that and you'll have enough strength to do what must be done. He gave his son leave to go and train. As Uriah was walking out the door, his father asked an oft-repeated question between the two. Why do you fight, Uriah? Uriah paused, knowing the answer, but feeling his own resolve being tested. He didn't care for Rukia, he was still angry with the Soul Reapers, but he knew why he fought. To help Ichigo, to protect the balance of the worlds. I fight to help my comrades," he said before leaving for the basement of the hospital, the hardest place to manipulate Reishi. In front of a warehouse. Ichigo remembered the last time he stood in front of that large building of wood. Something so simple, so plain, no one would recognize it or what was hidden inside. It was just after Chad's own powers manifested, Ichigo's hollow power grew more and more chaotic, necessitating this visit to others close to him. They eventually helped to teach him balance as they learned from him to understand their own powers more. These were the people best able to help Chad. "You sure about this, Ichigo?" Sato asked his friend, looking at the warehouse in a disappointed manner. "These guys will be able to help me. Your powers seem more like a hollow's, Chad," Ichigo explained. "We would have brought you here sooner, but it wasn't exactly the same." He turned to his large shield with a confident grin. "So until we manage to find anyone that believes they can help you, trust me on this," he said before narrowly dodging a sandal being thrown at him. "You think you can just show up without calling dumbass?" yelled an irate tomboyish little girl in a red tracksuit. "You'd better get ready for a major A-dash." She was shoved out of the way as a white bullet with green hair tackled Ichigo. "Berry-tan. I missed you," the hyperactive girl exclaimed, hugging Ichigo tightly. "Mashiro," he said, pointing at the girls for his friend, and Hiri. "Just some of the new friends you are going to make." "Yeah, sorry about that, Ichigo," someone said, so casually that you wouldn't know someone was being cuddled to death while trying to dodge Hiri swinging her sandals at him. "Just wanted to see if your awareness was still up to par." The yellow-haired man was then hit with Hiri being flung at him like a baseball. "Screw you, Shinji." Ichigo got up and made his way inside the warehouse, Mashiro still clinging to his back cheering Horsey excitedly. Chad started, slowly following after Ichigo. "Just ignore her, Chad," he said as they entered the warehouse. "Say hello to the Vizards. The more dignified ones anyway," Ichigo said, bringing attention to the others. The large, green-suited Hachigen, the black-suited Rose, the silver-haired Kensei, and the star Afro Love, who was laughing at something in his manga. "Mostly, I guess. So this is the guy you were talking about?" Rose asked, coming down to meet Ichigo face to face. "He seems to be a man of good music tastes." "You can get that from just a look," Ichigo asked as Kensei pried his former lieutenant of his back. "He has that special air about him," he said, waving his arms around like he was conducting an orchestra. "Tell me, Sato-san, do you play guitar?" "Yes, I do," Chad replied. "How wonderful," Rose said, actually excited. "We should play together sometime." "He's not here for guitar lessons," Kensei yelled after he was done scolding his childish partner. "He's here for training." He walked up to the giant, sizing him up. "Show us." Chad took a moment to raise his right arm and summoned his powers. A black oily film covered the entirety of his right arm before solidifying into the familiar form. "Definitely hollow in nature," said Hiri, coming up out of nowhere. She got back into her old roots as Kisuke's lieutenant when he created the Research and Development Institute of Soul Society. Being the former head researcher gave her some helpful skills. "If I had to guess, you were born with these powers," and prolonged exposure to Ichigo, she turned to yell mockingly at the hybrid, who still couldn't control his Ryutsu, I might add. "Screw you, monkey!" Ichigo yelled back. Kensei glared at them to stop squabbling before things got out of hand. Anyway, because Ichigo has hollow like Reishi himself, it helped awaken these dormant powers within, Hiri said, finishing her analysis and feeling a little proud of herself. "Kisuke already figured that out," Ichigo said, causing her to twitch in anger. "You wanna go, you freaking jackass? I'll beat you from to dash." "Hiri," Shinji said, firmly. Hiri actually stopped and looked at her de facto leader. "How best do you think we can train him?" Hiri took a second to think. "Fight us with our masks on, I guess," she said after a few seconds. The best way was probably to train in Hueco Mondo, but there was no way to get there. The Vizards learned many new techniques after Ichigo got them to come to terms with their hollows, but they couldn't get to the land of the hollows. I'll go first. Love said, getting up from his seat to lead Chad down into the training basement. Ichigo stayed behind with Hachigen. Hey Haki. He said, getting the barrier master's attention. I need something. Yes Ichigo. He said, respectfully of the boy. I need to learn one of your barrier spells. Ichigo said, in a serious tone, which was ruined when he finally noticed an absence of a certain girl. Where's Lisa? Went to get the latest porn. Shinji said, following the others into the basement. Why am I not surprised? Kisuke's training hall. Yuriyuki watched as Orium and Tatsuki traded blows against one another. Originally, she wanted Orium to focus on gaining more control over her shields, but Tatsuki vouched for Orium being a natural martial artist. The results were speaking for themselves as she proved herself a very graceful fighter. Yuriyuki decided to focus on improving their martial arts while tossing in their special powers as well. Tatsuki slammed a fiery fist against Orium's shield while she sent Tsubaki to knock Tatsuki off her feet, who managed to recover by handstanding with a quick twist and striking against the shield again. Separate. Yuriyuki yelled as they jumped away from each other. Orium jumping onto her Santen Kesshun while Tatsuki managed a weak Shunpo jump. That's good. Take 5. Orium was swift and graceful while Tatsuki was strong and fast. You two are doing pretty well for novices, but we can't afford that with Soul Reaper captains and lieutenants. By the way Sensei, Tatsuki spoke up from drinking her water, there's a karate tournament coming up that I promised to go to. Can we continue doing that? Yuriyuki gave a dry look to her disciple. You realize that would be child's play for you, right? The cat-like woman said disapprovingly. Yeah, but I'd like the recognition for Ichigo to brag, I'm dating the strongest high schooler in the nation. She said, doing an impression of her boyfriend that seemed more like his Hein. Yuriyuki could only chuckle at that thought. Fine, we'll go. She said, acquiescing to her student's desires. But you better win. You hear me, Arisawa? Yes, sensei. She yelled confidently. She and Orium got ready for the next bout when curiosity caught their sensei. By the way, she said almost teasingly, there's a fireworks festival next week and you'll have that time free to rest for the mission. Any plans of romance with a certain strawberry? She had a mischievous smile which only grew as she noticed a pair of luminescent blushes. We have plans, yes. Orium said hesitantly, clearly embarrassed and nervous. Oh my. Yuriyuki thought, having an idea of what they were planning. Aren't you two the naughty ones? Kukaki compound. Byakuya nursed his damaged arm while Yamamoto processed the information he just told him. Even after seeing Captain Anohana of the 4th Division, he still felt the burns of Ichigo's attack. He remembered facing down the boy, the force of that attack and the way he held himself. In 2 weeks, the old Shinigami finally spoke, that boy will come to Soul Society himself. To save Rukia Kukaki, and to speak with me. The bold and brashness of the claim reminded the aged man of a former captain that disappeared some 20 years ago. I must admit, I am curious as to what that brat would have to talk to me about. If what I think is correct, he's been trained by the exiled captains and lieutenants. He said, letting his experience try to determine what the boy's aim is. You think he plans to destroy Suriati? Byakuya asked calmly. Not at all. If that was his intention, he would not have told you anything. The old man said, stroking his long beard as he contemplated the strangeness of what was happening in Soul Society. The main governing body of Soul Society, the Central 46, were oddly insistent on Rukia being executed by the end of the month, and the method of choice was odd as well. Using the Sokioku for Rukia is excessive, and if she did it to save Ichigo's family then her punishment should be imprisonment. There is more to this than we think. The noble asked, surprised at the possibility of the Godai 13 or the Central 46 being manipulated to use excessive force on a dutiful Soul Reaper. Possibly. The old man stated, rising from his seat. We'll hold off the execution until this Kurosaka comes to Soul Society. I'll have him found and monitored in secret. When they come here, I want them captured alive with Ichigo brought to me. I will hear what he has to say. Yamamoto began to walk to his division, enjoying the fine day they found themselves in. Thank you for the tea, Captain Cookaki. 3 days later, Kurosaki household. It was morning and Yuzo was getting breakfast ready, a breakfast for 3 as her brother was still gone. Karen was sitting at the table, even more down than her usual stoicism. The mood was clear, they were worried and missed their brother. Karen. Yuzo started. Ichigo will be fine, right? TCH, yeah. Karen said with forced enthusiasm. Didn't you watch him wipe out all those hollows? Yeah, but Dad says any captain can do that. Yuzo said. Some are stronger than others and there are other soul reapers that close to captain levels. Karen was about to say something else when she noticed her sister was trembling. She got up and walked over to Yuzo, who immediately latched onto her twin and started crying. I'm scared for Ichigo. I want to help him but I can't. Yeah. Karen replied, hugging her kinder twin in a gentle embrace. I know the feeling, Yuzo. You're worrying over nothing. They heard their father say as he came into the room. I know my son and he's going to be fine. He's strong, he said, generating several large balls of compressed reishi floating above his hands, just like his parents. He smiled, feeling pride in his son and the progress he's shown. Keep up. He suddenly yelled, gently tossing the spirit spheres at his girls who immediately cheered up and started bouncing them around. Keep getting stronger, Ichigo. I'll keep them safe while you go to Soul Society. Chapter 13, Entering Soul Society. Kurosaka Clinic. The day had finally come. 2 weeks of preparations and now it was time to put it to the test. It was after the fireworks festival, one last day of fun, one last day of safety, one last day before they went out to save Rukia. Ichigo softly stroked his little sisters' heads as they rested on his lap, wanting to spend a little more time with their big brother. It took some stern and rather mean lectures from family and friends to remind the twins that they were more of a liability at their level, so they settled for staying with their brother for one more night, which Ichigo obliged. It wasn't until midnight that Kon, in his stuffed lion body, came up to Ichigo and exposed the opening to his back to let Ichigo know that it was time. Wordlessly, he took the small green pill and ejected into his Soul Reaper body. He gave a subtle nod to Kon, letting him know to take care of his sisters before leaving the house, where his father was waiting for him. This is a really dangerous mission you're going on, boy. Ishine said gravely. Some of the captains have been there for almost a millennium, with 2 being original members. They are powerful and dangerous. Ichigo hugged his father, stopping him from continuing. Relax, you old goat. He told his eccentric old man. If anything, I inherited your tenacity. I won't die so easily. Ishine snorted out his amusement. Damn right, boy. He said, returning his son's embrace. After a second, he separated and pulled out a letter. Take this to the Shiba household, they should help you. Oh yeah. Ichigo took the letter and pocketed it in his shiakusho. My relatives on your side. He said with some dread. Each one as hot-headed and bombastic as the last, Ishine said with a grin, making Ichigo sink lower. But Kyokaku manages to keep a lid on them all. He said, returning to his serious side. Last I heard, we fell out of high standing but we're still able to operate, so entering Siridi shouldn't be too difficult. Then it's off to the big white tower called the Repentance Cell. Ishine nodded as his boy guessed from the Soul Society trivia he was taught. While avoiding as many captains as possible. But you are going to talk to the old man while you're there, right? Ishine clarified, a little nervous about his son meeting Yamamoto. The old captain held the law in the highest regard, and a bunch of children spitting on those laws will not sit well with him. Gonna have to, Dad. He needs to know. Ichigo said, remembering the stories he heard of the monster called Wiwak. Everyone made him despise the self-proclaimed god more and more. Faced with him, the old man might listen to reason. He then walked off, ready for the mission that would be his first real test in a long time. Urahara's shop. The teens slowly gathered outside of the shop, waiting for their allies to gather. Chad was first to arrive in a sleeveless t-shirt with a magenta line going down the left side and black pants. Next was Ichigo with Orium and Tatsuki, wearing a pink t-shirt with track pants and a gray t-shirt with douji pants respectively. Yuryuki. So how big was he? was following them very discreetly. She then proceeded to interrogate and embarrass the poor girls until they told Yuriuki everything about when they were alone together. Why should it matter? Tatsuki yelled out while Ichigo and Chad ignored them, despite how much Urahara wanted details. Tatsuki didn't want to go into details of the mindless mating, preferring the romanticized idea of the first time. Because I want some myself. The dark-skinned noble said unashamed. The girl's first instinct was to go to their boyfriend and latch onto him. Not to steal him away. She reassured her students. Just to relieve some tensions. The girls still glared but decided to continue this talk later. I thought we were going to invade Soul Society, not to discuss sex lives. Someone said rather crudely. Many blushing faces turned to see Uriu in the same Quincy get-up but with a short cape and a belt with several silver rods with rings on top. Don't test her, Uriu. Ichigo warned. She's quite the multitasker. He took a quick glance at Uriu's gloved hand. The Seelschneiders I understand, but are you sure about that? Ichigo asked, not pointing out anything specific. Don't worry, Ichigo. Uriu said, offering a rare smile. I promise not to do anything foolish. Urahara can remove it later. He talked with Urahara the day after he finished the training with the Sanrei glove and gave him the chance to study it. If everything goes well, he should be able to remove it with no repercussions. Besides, I need all the advantages I can get to fight these Shinigami. Now that we're all here and accounted for, Kisuke said. Let's get to business. The group followed him down to the massive training hall he had set up, Tessai already waiting down there. No matter how many times I see it, this place still astounds me. Tatsuki said with a hint of nostalgia, remembering her spars with Ichigo in the rocky arena. I know what you mean. Orium chirped. It's so cool. Your reactions are so kind. Tessai cried out, tears crawling down his face that people appreciated the hard work that went into the place. All right. Enough. Urahara called out before clapping and summoning paper-covered blocks that formed a door frame. Now let's get to what you need to know. The scientist said, getting suddenly serious. Skipping the technical explanation, this door will give you spirit bodies you need to enter Soul Society. Through this you will enter the Danga, the realm in between this world and Soul Society. Keep moving and avoid the Kuryua, which captures spiritual bodies. If my calculations are right, which is always, the cleaner should have made its run yesterday, so all you have to do is charge forward. You have 4 minutes to reach Soul Society. Himself and Tessai proceeded to open the door to the realm of the dead. This place should land us in West Rukon, there we will have to go to the Shiba house. Yuriuki yelled out in her cat form. Ready? Now. She called as they all jumped into the realm beyond the living. First Division Barracks, Soul Society. It has been 2 weeks since Rukia Kukaki's arrest. The old leader of the Shinigami announced to his 13 captains. In those 2 weeks we have monitored the Kurosaka boy and continued the investigation. He called out, sparing a slight glance to few of his captains that he had the utmost trust in. Captain Swifon, Kurotsuke, what have you found? The deranged scientist stepped forward to go first. From our surveillance, he seemed to really frequent 4 areas. The skeletal man said with traces of annoyance. However, when he heads to these areas his presence actually seems to disappear. Obviously Kido, but we've been unable to identify the source. Every time my men have checked it out, they've been unable to find anything. The slender Swifon said. He's skilled, sir. Obviously a danger. She said before alarms began to ring out. Attention! Red alert! Red alert! Intruders detected in West Rukon. The alarm called out, surprising most of the captains in attendance. Kenpeka looked ecstatic at the prospect of a challenge while the blind Blacktuan seemed angered along with Swifon. The young Hachugaya was shocked while most everyone else seemed to begin thinking on their next course of action. So it begins. The ancient man thought. What drives you to come to meet me, boy? Prepare yourselves. He announced to the assembled captains. This is likely Kurosaki and his allies. I want them captured alive. The ever-smiling Jin Ichimaru stepped forward, one of the captains Yamamoto did not trust. "I'll go greet our little intruders," he said, walking away from the group. "It should be interesting how things proceed," he said before waving off lazily. Chapter 14, The Challenge. Soul Society, West Rukon. Ichigo and his friends appeared above the sky, dropping down onto the land that was the afterlife. The collection of empowered humans scanned the glistening white city on one side and the darker, less impressive wood and stone of the area they were at. "Where are we?" Tatsuki asked while everyone continued to scan their surroundings. "Is this really Soul Society?" "This is indeed Soul Society," the masculine voice of Yoryuki's feline form answered. "This is the Rukon district. The place with the greatest freedom but the poorest conditions," Ichigo continued, remembering what he was told a while ago. "Apparently the higher the district number, the worse it gets." He turned to the white city on the other side. "And that should be the Siraidai, home of the wealthy nobles and Shinigami. So when we die," Tatsuki started, "we either turn into mindless starving beasts hell-bent on devouring others or just live in a facsimile of feudal Japan." "Seems like it," Uriah replied, sounding rather disappointed. "That's it in a nutshell," Yoryuki confirmed. "This is the suckiest afterlife ever," Tatsuki deadpanned. "The best hope for people is that they have enough Ryatsu to become Shinigami. And even then, it doesn't seem any better because the ones in power don't seem to care." Ichigo said, a little miffed that this was the place he's been sending souls. One life to another that was pretty much the same as the last. "Maybe it's not that bad," Orium said, forcing her usual cheerfulness, trying to make the answer to an age-old question of the afterlife seem less bleak. "Chad. Launch," Ichigo said to his muscular friend. He nodded as Ichigo jumped toward him and he cupped his hands to give Ichigo a foothold before sending him skyward. Ichigo kept his eyes shut as wind streamed past his body until his ascent ended. He opened his eyes as almost all of the districts lined out in front of him, each one becoming worse than the last. He took a glance to Siraidai, but was unable to identify any of the squad headquarters. Using his Pesquisa here would just give him a migraine, but he might not have a choice. He had to find that Yamamoto guy. He began to descend back to his friends, managing a small stream of reishi beneath his feet to slow his drop. "Nope," he said once he hit the ground. "Soul Society is the worst afterlife. Rukon gets worse and worse the farther down you get. Only thing that matters is how much Ryatsu and money you have. It certainly wasn't easy, I can tell you that," they heard a teasing tone say. Each member of the group turned their heads to a silver-haired man with a fox-like grin. He wore the Shinigami Shiakusho with a white haori over it with a diamond pattern. A clear sign of a captain. "Hello," he greeted cheerfully, something Orium was all too happy to return. "Hi there," she cheered. "Who are you?" "What a cute girl," he said amused. "I am Jinichi Maru, captain of Squad 3. This is bad," Yoryuki thought to herself. "Ichigo and Uriah are the only other ones I'm sure that can fight captains, but they have no idea what he is capable of." She noticed Ichigo stepping forward to speak with the man. "Ichigo, make me proud. Don't rush in blindly like an idiot. You must be Ichigo Kurosaki," he said, giving his full attention to the hybrid. "The commander is interested in meeting you." "Feelings mutual," Ichigo said quickly and calmly, trying to get a read on the man before him. "You here to take us to him? Did we really warrant an escort from a captain? It's not every day that humans try to invade Soul Society while they're still alive." Jin's hand rested on the hilt of his blade, completely nonchalant and without any trace of violent or ill intentions. "Fewer still that could get the drop on Captain Kukaki like you did. So, yes, you do warrant a captain as escort." Ichigo's instincts flared at that very second, causing him to draw his Zanpakuto at the same time Jin did. "Shoot to kill, Shinso." Jin fluidly drew out his short blade and aimed at Ichigo in the same motion. Ichigo barely managed to deflect the attack by a fraction of a second. "You will be executed after little Rukia dies," he said menacingly, causing Ichigo to glare as he flash-stepped in front of Ichigo. "You are both criminals after all," he said before their blades clashed, causing a small shockwave. 2 sealed blades, a regular katana and a wakizashi. And here I thought I was going to talk to him peacefully. Ichigo grunted, struggling a little against the strength of Jin's blade. Guess that was a pipe dream. Oh, he is interested in you, Ichigo, he said, keeping that taunting grin and showing no exertion on his side. But facts are facts. You stole a Shinigami's power, are trespassing, and no doubt plan on breaking out a criminal. Rukia covered for you, refused to say anything in her defense, and refuses to do anything but sit in her cell. He leaned in and his smirk grew. She's going to die, because of you. He sang, making Ichigo glare. You can have your time with the commander, but killing you will be easier after taking you in by dash. Heido number 1, show. Ichigo quickly said. Jin looked down and saw Ichigo's hand a scant few centimeters from his stomach, which flashed crimson before blasting him back into the Siridi and embedded into a wall. Jin managed to get a look at Ichigo as the dust cleared. Ichigo raised his hand to give Jin the finger. I wonder how this report is gonna go, he said before the spirit wall slammed down and separated the two. You've grown strong, kid, Jin thought as his squad appeared. Their worried cries falling on deaf ears as he thought about the boy he was monitoring since his birth. Looks like your estimations were wrong, Aizen, he's stronger. That definitely wasn't Kido. He vaguely heard his blonde lieutenant say something about broken ribs as he began healing Jin. The commander is going to be pissed about this. Back with Ichigo. That happened, Ichigo thought to himself, flexing his hand. Should have expected this difference between sparring with a captain and fighting one. He shook it a few more times to get the feeling back into it. It was then that he noticed the looming shadow of a giant with a fez and ponytailed sideburns. And now there's this guy. That was quite the display, spiky head. The giant said in a deep masculine tone. It's been ages since someone tried to enter the Siridi without a travel pass, and even longer since someone tried to fight a captain, let alone gain a captain's attention. Ichigo looked up to the man as they stared down the other. My name is Jidanbo Ikazunka and I am the guardian of this gate. There has been no person to ever come through this gate in the 3 centuries I've guarded it, he said with a smirk. You're the first one to actually make me a little nervous about that thought, and the challenge excites me. Sorry to ruin your fun, pal, Ichigo said, bringing his blade up before sheathing it at his hip, but I have no interest in fighting you, big guy, he told the gatekeeper, shocking the giant man. Instead, could you be so kind as to give me directions? He asked the big guy. My name is Ichigo Shiba, I'm trying to find my clan. Oh, certainly, Jidanbo said, pleasantly surprised. Most nobles and soul reapers look down on us ghetto folk, which is why those that get out try to get stationed here to make sure they are treated right. The Shiba clan are also good to the people of the Rukon districts, he explained before looking closer to Ichigo. How are you related to the Shibas exactly? My father was a branch head of the clan, he said before pulling out his Heinz letter. He told me to give this to Kyokaku. Jidanbo squinted at the letter before he confirmed its legitimacy. All right. You want to head that way, he said, pointing off into the distance. You'll know it when you see a small house with a towering chimney and the banner being held up by arms. Ichigo paused at the description he was given. I would ask if you're kidding, but if they're anything like my dad, I shouldn't be surprised, Ichigo said before turning and leaving. Nice meeting you, Jidanbo. The giant gatekeeper waved back before sitting down as the people came out of hiding. Well, I do remember seeing a house with a giant chimney stack, so we should go there for now. Right, the rest said. Unfortunately, that trip was waylaid by the denizens of the Rukon district coming to meet the newcomers. After Yuichi showed up, Chad almost begged to stick around for a bit. Captain's meeting. What the hell were you thinking? Yamamoto roared at the nearly recovered Jin. Captain Kokaki made it clear that Kurosaka was willing to listen to reason and speak peacefully. What you did was mark him as an enemy, so he'll respond in kind. Jin winced and struggled under the spiritual pressure the head captain was releasing in the room, affecting some of the lesser captains somewhat. Please, hear me out, sir, Jin managed to wheeze out under the ancient man's wrath. Yamamoto relented somewhat to allow the brat a chance to speak. Thank you, sir, he said, getting the air back into his lungs. It has been so long since anything like this happened. It could help to make sure ourselves and our troops don't get rusty, he said, letting a silver-laced forked tongue work its magic. Besides, this will let you see his measure for yourself. Whether you think he can be trusted or whatever it is that you have planned. Yamamoto could not deny that he was just a bit tempted to have the boy join the ranks of Soul Society, but guilt of his past actions forbade him from doing so. Depending on what Ichigo says to him, he could have a promising successor if his strength was not an exaggeration. This will not go unpunished, Ichimaru, the old man growled. We have a report saying that the boy claims relation to the Shiba clan, which means they will be using their cannon if he gains their assistance. And knowing that woman, they very likely will. But with the barrier in place, they will probably end up scattered. Inform your squads, I want them captured alive. Dismissed, he announced as the captains dispersed, each one already planning which Ryoka to go after. Looks like I was right. Captain Isin, I hope your son surprises me, he thought, turning his attention to the bespectacled Aizen helping Jin out. That was a risky move, Aizen whispered to his former lieutenant and trusted ally. Even I thought he was going to kill you. It seems to have worked, Jin responded. Now you just have to wait for them to create a ruckus so you can stage your death and take over the Central 46. Then push for Rukia execution when these Ryoka prove themselves enemies. Aizen smiled harmlessly, completely masking his dark intentions. The Shiba House. Banner, Uriah said, identifying the building. Chimney, Chad continued. Kyokaku Shiba. Tatsuki almost laughed out. Arms, Ichigo finished, looking at the bizarre house that his cousins occupied. A sturdy-looking warehouse with giant stone arms holding a banner saying, Kyokaku Shiba, with a towering chimney in the back. I know I'm not supposed to judge by appearances, but what the hell? Tatsuki cracked up laughing while Chad and Orium barely reacted too much, with Yoriuki getting some twisted kick out of Ichigo and Uriah's freak out. Come on, how bad is this compared to what you two have seen? She asked while walking ahead. Uriah, Ichigo called to his cousin. Yeah, he replied. Thanks for being somewhat normal, Ichigo said gratefully. No problem, Ichi. Somewhat normal, Uriah asked, offended. Let's go, Ichigo yelled, dodging the conversation. They got close to the banner when they saw someone wearing a bandana, black vest, with baggy gray pants and matching undershirt. Riding a boar with a bunch of goons. Hey! Who are you guys? He called out, curious about Ichigo's group, until he saw Ichigo in his Soul Reaper garb. What's a crummy Soul Reaper doing here? He growled, stomping up to Ichigo. I told you to get a change of wardrobe, Ichigo, Uriah called out. I offered to make you a new outfit, but you said no. The irate man tried to get Ichigo's attention, but Ichigo felt this talk was more important. I told you, I don't think I could pull off the whole cape thing, Ichigo said, remembering early outfit drafts Uriah made. They'd get in the way of my Zanpakuto and my fighting. Nonsense, Uriah defended. I'd be sure to make it fashionable and functional. Not overly long like most people think of capes as. I asked you the man tried again, until Ichigo grabbed him by his face without even sparing a glance. Heido number 11, Tsuyuzuri Raiden, Ichigo recited, electrocuting the man in his hand until he dropped the cartoonishly burned man. It'd probably end up torn up and ruined anyway. You know how I fight, Ichigo said while the man's goons were screaming about Boss Ganju being down. You'd probably spend every other week making me a new cape. I did have designs other than ones with capes, Uriah mumbled in his defense. How dare you? They heard a voice growl out from above. The group looked at the top of the arms to see two men standing atop them. Attacking Master Ganju like that? The other said as they dropped in front of Ichigo, Ganju safely away with his underlings trying to bring him back to consciousness. They looked like twins except their color and faces. Kaganihiko, said the yellow-clothed man with the long face. And Shiraganihiko, said the white-clothed man with the cleft chin. Cannot allow you to come any closer. They yelled together. They were both bigger than Chad in height and muscle and were prepared to fight. Leave now or die. Ichigo merely stared at them, not intimidated in the slightest, as he remembered his father telling him about these two. The loyal retainers of the Shiba clan. Told him that with Yoriuki in his letter, those two would end up begging forgiveness if they did something stupid. Sorry, but could you let us in? Ichigo asked, pulling out his Ishine's letter. I have this message from Ishine Shiba for the head of the clan. The twins looked surprised and examined the letter when Yoriuki spoke out. That letter is real, she said, still in her cat form. Ishine is alive, needs Kyokaku to read that. The twins freaked. Yes, yes, of course. Kagenihiko said, bowing respectfully to the now honored guests. We apologize for earlier, Master Yoriuki. Sir. Ichigo. Shiraganihiko said, trying to remember the earlier conversation between Hybrid and Quincy. Please, come this way. The yellow-dressed man said as he opened the door to the descending staircase. They reached the bottom where it looked like a more proper home with doors and hallways. Wait as I announce your dash. Just let them in, Kagenihiko. A rough girl's voice yelled out, making the man stiffen. Why yes. Master Kyokaku. He cried, opening the door to reveal a large room filled with tatami mats, and a lone woman with bandages on her messy black hair, tattoo on her left arm while her right was absent, with a loose red robe showing off her ample cleavage. It's been a while, Yoriuki, she said with a tomboyish grin. Holy crap. Tatsuki yelled out in surprise. Her boobs are bigger than Orium's. Orium looked down, cupping her own boobs, and felt lacking in the breasts department for the first time in her life. Something Ichigo noticed. Don't worry, Orium, I don't love you for your boobs, he said, pulling her in for a hug. I love how you make me feel better just by being you, he said, making her smile with a happy blush. And you love me cause I'm a confident fireball that kicks ass, right? Tatsuki said, getting in close. Yes, I do. Ichigo growled at her, capturing her lips quickly. Good answer. Quite the ladies' man, isn't he? Kyokaku asked her old friend as the cat walked to her. Yes, although he doesn't have as many girls as he should. Yoriuki lamented, being unable to tease him with her sexiness or embarrass him for being a playboy. So, you had a letter from my uncle? Kyokaku asked, getting Ichigo's attention again. Yeah. Ichigo said, freeing himself from his girlfriends to hand over Ishine's letter. Dad did say to give this to the head of the clan. Kyokaku actually looked shocked and read the letter before cracking up. So that's what the old goat was doing. She laughed before rising to her feet and wrapping her lone arm around Ichigo. Welcome to the family, cuz. Let's get you to the Siriti. Chapter 15, Invading Siriti. With Byakuya, Rukia, and Renji. The group marched down the lone bridge, the single connection to the only entrance to the ultimate prison cell for those on death row in Soul Society. In the lead was the captain of the 6th squad with his lieutenant. Behind them were the 4 Kido Corps members leading Rukia by leads connected to their forked staves. There are no words among them, not until they reach the jutting white tower of the Repentance cell. The transfer unit went into the meaning of the prison cell and its significance, maybe hoping to bring Rukia some peace. Captain Kukaki, Lieutenant Abarai, thank you for the escort, said one of the cloth-covered spell users. We must be going now, they announced, Renji watching his old friend. She appeared to have given up, seems to not care whether or not her life ends. The more time she spent in those damned cells seemed to drain more and more life and joy from her. This was probably the nail in the coffin that would make her give up entirely. He couldn't allow that. He hurts that his friend was suffering. Lieutenant, they shouted as Renji stormed over to the prisoner until a calm hand steadied him. Leave him be, Byakuya said, keeping an eye on his subordinate and family. They were friends long ago. Let them speak one last time. Going to the Repentance cell was a final death sentence, no one goes there to survive. Listen, Renji whispered upon reaching Rukia, that Kurosaka kid is in Soul Society. His words, sparking a reaction from Rukia for the first time in so long. He was willing to speak for your behalf, before Captain Ichimaru decided to make a game out of the situation. Rukia was feeling an odd mix of emotions. Hope, fear, worry, anger, all coursing through her soul. He's been confirmed alive but considered hostile. Orders are to capture, he said, pulling away from the girl and leaving the White Tower of Death. Why did you tell her that? The noble asked his second in command. That was close to overstepping the limit, Renji. Captain, I just Renji started before Byakuya cut him off again. You should have left it at he's alive. The captain admonished. When I give you orders, you are expected to follow them. He scolded as they walked away from the towering white cell. Tell her that Ichigo was alive. That was your task. The tattooed warrior was silent as he tried to think of how to phrase his next statement properly. She just seemed so dead, sir. He said finally. We used to be close during our days in the Rukon districts and the academy. He said, briefly flashing to the times they laughed together before statuses placed their demmed barriers between them. I wanted to help, even if the repentance cell is the same as a death sentence. Byakuya stopped to face his subordinate. Telling her that he's alive would have done that. That's what I told you to do, Renji, not that they were here. He told the red-haired warrior. Just the knowledge that he was alive would put her at peace, but Rukia is so resigned to the idea of Soul Society's power that she would accept her death if it comes to that. As of yet, she is not to be executed, he said, turning to return to his office to finish out some business. What he said confused Renji and he was determined to find out more. But if she isn't to be executed, then why is she in the repentance cell? He asked, catching up to the noble. Byakuya sighed and gestured for Renji to get closer. Once his lieutenant bridged the gap, he began to speak. Were it simply the matter of her giving her powers to a human, she would be sentenced to death. He explained in a whisper. As Ichigo said, he stole her power and was willing to speak on her behalf. Until we know more, Rukia's sentence is on hold. Renji breathed out a sigh of relief and resolved to find and capture Ichigo as per the order, but his captain wasn't done. This is highly classified, Renji, so you cannot speak of this to anyone, but something is wrong in Soul Society right now, he said, shocking Renji. Pushing for execution, more to kill Rukia than meting out justice it seems. And using the Sukyaku on an unseated Soul Reaper who was performing her duties in the best manner she could. This is all too excessive, and whatever is going on is linked to Kurosaki. The noble surmised as the two continued their walk in whispers. Then, my orders, sir? Renji hesitantly asked, the idea of a conspiracy worrying him. Do not speak of this with anyone but myself or the head captain, and capture Ichigo Kurosaki, he said before glaring at his second again. And don't get cocky this time. He's proven to be a powerful warrior with a focused mind. With Ichigo and friends. You're going to shoot us out of a cannon. Ichigo yelled in shock at the absurd plan that he was told of. That's the plan? He asked his newly found relatives as she stood proudly in front of the tower. I take it as Hein forgot to mention we're fireworks experts. Kyokaku asked with a amused smirk, watching the teens gawk at the family gun. He said explosives factored in, just not how. Ichigo said, reconsidering asking for her help. Oh, don't be a baby, she said, tossing him a crystal ball with a red crane design. That Raishukaka will keep you safe when we blast you off, she said, walking down towards him. Just put your Ryutsu in and you'll create a shield that will be the cannonball. Ichigo did as instructed and was surrounded by a crystallized ball of spirit energy. Wow. He's got potential, Kyokaku remarked, surprised by the power her distant relative displayed. We made sure to train him well, Yuriuki stated, a deep sense of pride evident in her tone. That's impressive work, cousin, Ganju told Ichigo with a hint of respect. After being told of their relations, Ganju received a beating from his sister, even after he apologized to Ichigo and his friends. By the way, I'm all for insulting the Godi I-13, but who are you going to rescue? He asked, only now hearing about the reason for invasion. Our friend, Orium said, seeing no harm in telling their new allies. Rukia Kukaki. A name that meant almost nothing to Ganju, but Kyokaku recognized it. Oh yeah. she said in casual recollection. She's the one that killed Big Brother. Saying that made Ganju snap. You mean that bitch? He growled as Ichigo released the spirit core surrounding him. Nope. I want nothing to do with helping her. Count me out. I am not helping that dash. He ranted before the irate fireworks master bashed him in the face. Shut the hell up, Ganju. She had to kill Kyan. He got possessed by a hollow and would have killed more people as a monster. She told him, finally enlightening him to the truth. Her captain, Juashiro Yukatake, told me the whole story. That man does not lie. Ever. She then pulled him up by the collar of his shirt and started growling. And our dear uncle has asked us to help a new member of the clan, and that's what we're gonna do. Now suck it up and prepare to go with them. Got it. She glared at Ganju, making him nod mutely with bullets of sweat pouring down his face. Good. And Ichigo? She called to the hybrid who was discussing the validity of their plan with the Quincy. This might be our best bet since Siridi is supposed to be in a spirit barrier. The archer said. Which manages to allow air and water in. Ichigo finished. At least it should be fun. He noticed his distant relative calling to him. Yeah. 2 things. Bring Rukia here, we need to have a talk with her, and make sure you survive. She yelled with a grin. You lot owe me big for this and I expect you to pay for it. Ichigo rolled his eyes before agreeing. Good. Now for you lot to prepare for your trip. Lieutenant's meeting. The lieutenant was on his way with some of his fellow colleagues, the memories of the conversation with his captain and the captain of Squad 5 replaying in his head. What are you saying, Captain Aizen? Isn't the execution on hold? Renji asked the learned man. This may just be a farce, Lieutenant Abarai. The captain replied. The greatest power in Siridi is the Central 46, and those in power are rarely content with losing it. He gave the lieutenant his full and focused attention with Renji responding in kind. If I had to guess, this is more to show their power and authority, that no matters the circumstances, what they say is law. But the commander and other captains would never stand for that. Renji argued. In most circumstances, yes. But the head captain swore himself to uphold the law of Soul Society. Kurosaka's existence could be a show of defiance to the Central 46 and Rukia kept him hidden. They fear that these incidents might disrupt the balance of power in Siridi and the commander's hands are tied unless he wants to break his vow to the law. All of the Godai 13 hunt Ichigo and his allies, while a questionable few might act on their own feelings. Aizen adjusted his glasses as he told Renji what was to come. Soul Society may face civil war, Lieutenant. The question is who's on what side. Should I tell him about the concerns Captain Kukaki has? He wondered, entering the room of mostly assembled second-in-commands. No, I need to find Ichigo again. Aizen is probably already in on the possible conspiracy plot anyway. Renji. He heard the Squad 5 lieutenant ask him. She was a demure girl with black hair and a white bun, almost like a flower of gentle personality. You haven't seen Captain Aizen around, have you? She seemed almost worried, like a puppy that was just lost. No, can't say I have. He said, looking away from the small girl. He had special orders, and he didn't want to bother the poor girl too much. I'm worried. She said. He's been acting strange lately. When I asked him, he said nothing. I don't know what to do. She explained, on the verge of tears. Renji caved. No man is powerful enough to resist a crying girl in need of comfort. Look, it's probably nothing. He said, as helpful as he could. The Captain Aizen I know could resolve this invasion easily and peacefully. He said, having faith in the gentle man known as Sosuke Aizen. Ichigo wouldn't kill without reason. He said, unconsciously rubbing his side where Ichigo stabbed him. He's not that kind of man. Back with Ichigo's group. And then we kill Aizen. Ichigo said as he and Yoriyuki planned out an itinerary for Siridi. Get in, find the head captain, rescue Rukia, and then kill Aizen. It seemed like a solid plan, but Jin's actions made it into a competition of sorts. They would try to do their things while the Soul Reapers tried to capture them. An afterlife game of cat and mouse. His friends were working on maintaining a spirit shield for when they head into Shirai. Do not underestimate Aizen or overestimate yourself, Ichigo. Yuriuki lightly scolded her disciple. You are powerful but not the strongest you could be. We've had to be light enough with your training that Aizen wouldn't get too suspicious. She suspects that Aizen was already aware of Ichigo's current abilities, or at least was willing to learn and had ways of finding out. For now, wait and gather your strength. We have a battle on our hands, she said before they heard a thud and yelp. They looked over to see a crying Orium holding her eye, behind a shaken Tatsuki, that was in front of an angry Kyokaku. You brat! She growled, making the younger girls shrink down in terror, and Kyokaku's fiery aura flared brighter. Do you realize what you've done? How long do you think it took to get used to having one arm? She yelled out, revealing a fully formed right arm where it did not exist before, matching her left for every inch. Hey, she just wanted to see if it would work. Tatsuki defended, trying to put up a brave front before the angry noble. We thought you'd like to have your arm back. I am happy to have both arms, Kyokaku said, calming down considerably. It's just that I'm so used to not having both that it'll take a while to get used to. She brought up her right arm, flexing and rubbing it, ensuring that it was really there. This'll take a while to be comfortable with again, she mumbled. All right. You've mastered the Raishukaku, now rest up. You leave at dawn, Kyokaku announced before heading to get herself some dinner. And girls. Doesn't change what I want, she said, making the two curse quietly and confusing the men. When morning came, they began their invasion of Shirai. Check the description for the links to the author.